Can you hear me now? There we go. All right, welcome everybody to the Run Book Show, and thank you for joining me. And Action Jackson, delete all that messed up front. Although if you delete it, I guess we lose the chat. So keep it on. What the hell? People can see me floundering around. It's the disadvantage of not being at home with your regular setup, having to adjust. I pressed a button here and muted something I didn't even know I muted, and I'm back. I'm here. We're good. Let's see. When did we last talk? We last talked, I can't remember. Monday, I think, or something like that. It's been a while. So, yes, been busy in California. I think, and I've been doing, I can't remember if I told you, but I've been doing this public speaking seminar at the Ayn Rand Institute for its young intellectuals. So we'll be doing I've been giving kind of the theory, and then they present, and then I critique them, and it's been really good. So I've really enjoyed that, and I think they're benefiting from it. So hopefully we'll get a whole crop of better speakers for going through the program. All right, we've got a stacked program today. I have no idea why I listed all these things. I don't know that we can get to all of them. We'll see what we can get through to, but we will certainly try. Cook, thank you. Thank you for the support. Don't forget to support the show on the Super Chat. You've had the whole week off. You've been able to save up your dollars all week. Alejandrina is here to encourage you along, but you've had the whole week where you haven't had your own book shows, so you haven't had to contribute your support. So hopefully show some generosity. Hopefully you get some value for value, and use the Super Chat. Of course, you can also ask questions, and as Alejandrina is pointing out in the chat, we do have a goal. We always have a goal. The goal is at least $400. It would be nice to get more of that. I want to start off with actually something I didn't list. So there you go. I have 75 topics, and I've added a 76th one. Somebody says, I think your aunt has an uncle in Portugal. I did. He passed away, but yes, I still have an aunt, and I think maybe a cousin or two who live in Lisbon. But my uncle actually died a few years ago. But I do have my uncle, who is my mother's brother, but his wife is still there. But I expect to spend some time in Portugal over the next few years. So Rafael, maybe we'll have a chance to visit. You'll have to tell me where you are in Portugal, because so we can hook up sometime. But I will. I'm gonna be in Lisbon in March. I know that, and then I expect to be else. Thoughts on Nick Gaetano's art? My favorite is For the Virtue of Selfishness. All right. I promise I'll get to the super chat questions. Just give me a few minutes, because I have to. You're in Porto. I love Porto. Porto has better restaurants, better food than Lisbon. I'll say that. And better weather in the summer. All right. So you all know about my debate with Sam Seder, or Seder, whatever, however he calls it, and the response has been quite amazing, and there's still arguments going on Twitter over my comments on the Florida building collapse. They've created magnificent straw man of me, and they try to knock him down. But even those who understand what I actually said, the hate, the disgust that they are expressing towards me is pretty amazing. So hey, best friend Hank is here, and he's bringing his A game. Thank you. He's trimming the glass around the hub. No, you can trim the glass later. You can stay around and trim the grass later. Procrastinating on the grass is fine. He's been extremely busy with work. All right. God, priorities people have. Trimming the grass is more important than listening to the show live. I don't know. Anyway, I got this one private message on Twitter that I thought I would share with you, because I think this reflects an attitude I've seen. I got similar emails when I attacked the alt-right. And this is an email from obviously the left, and I'll tell you the difference between the alt-right and the left and the way they respond. But this is the nature of argumentation. This is the nature of the response to my debate with Sam Seder, to the comments I made about the building and the collapse of the building in Sam Seder on the show. This is what he says. This is Paul Alvarez at Paul ALV 123-98787. If you want to go harass him, all right. Your willingness to blame the victims of the condo collapse is reprehensible. Okay, so far, fine. I didn't blame the victims of the condo. They're the other ones who procrastinated, didn't fix the condo. So in a sense, they are to blame, at least some of the victims. But it's reprehensible. And then he continues, so much so that it should have immediate consequences. He can't spell consequences, but put that aside. The government, in parentheses, yes, the government should send men armed with clubs to you. You should be dragged into the street and beaten into liquid pulp and bone shards. You are a threat, a terrorist, a moron, and a piece of dog shit. I sincerely hope you get exactly what you deserve. Hopefully, a nice lingering stroke that brings you and everyone you love extreme pain and suffering. All right. So even terrorists get a trial. I don't get a trial. I get dragged into the street and beaten into liquid pulp and bone shard, otherwise murdered by a vigilante gang, right? No trial. I'm a terrorist because I spoke something he doesn't like. Note the difference between him and the alt-right. So if this was the alt-right writing, they would say, we're going to organize a gang and we're going to come and beat you up and we're going to kill you. A leftist is not going to do that. That would be too much personal responsibility. That would taking action for himself. No. He's going to delegate it to the government. The government is going to send thugs to beat me up. He's going to send the Hitler Youth, the SS, the gang that the government chooses to come and beat me up. He can't even do it himself. That is, he's not going to take the personal initiative to do it. He's going to delegate that, like the rest of his life, to the government and let them actually take the action against me. I mean, how pathetic is that? And then, of course, after he realizes maybe the government is not going to do that, then he wishes me, again, not he's going to poison me or cause me a stroke. He just wishes that I have a long, lingering stroke and that everyone, not just me, by the way, not just I should suffer. Everybody I love should live in extreme pain and suffering. Now, this is the mentality of thugs. This is the mentality of fascists. This is the mentality of communists. This is the mentality of people who can only understand one language, and that is the language of force. And when they encounter an idea they don't like, when they encounter the idea that they find offensive, when their emotions are rattled, I won't say they mind because they don't have much, when their emotions are rattled, all they can do is lash out. Lash out not intellectually, lash out not in any kind of sophisticated way, lash out with threats and violence. That is basically it. It's all they can do. And, it's not scary in a sense. It would be a lot scarier if he'd said, I'm going to get my friends and we're going to come and do it. But the idea that he's going to send the government to do it, we're heading towards a time where that is going to happen. In that sense, it's scary. I don't think that come after me. But we're heading to a time where the government is going to send their thugs to distribute justice and to fix things and to drag people onto the streets and beat them into a pulp. We are heading towards authoritarianism. And we're heading towards authoritarianism because the mentality of Paul Alvarez is the number of people with this mentality is growing both on left and right. the idea that violence is the solution, the idea that power is the solution, the idea that silencing people is the solution. The person and that I should be silenced because I advocate for personal responsibility for people actually, making decisions for themselves and recognizing the fact that people suffer the consequences of those decisions. When they make bad decisions, they suffer the consequences of that. If that is so abhorrent as the government needs to come and beat me up, what a world we are living in, what a world we are leaving our children. It is truly scary, and this is out there. This is an attitude. This is an attitude that is out there. This is an attitude whose prevalence is growing. You can see it in the Antifa thugs. You can see it in the nihilism. You can see it in the motivation to destroy, to break down, and to knock out. They are cowards, as if you've seen, at least Antifa that attacked me in London. We are cowards, but they want to delegate the violence, and we're getting to the point where the government is powerful enough, big enough, strong enough, where that delegation of violence is not, the delegation of violence is very realistic, very possible, very realistic, right? It's scary times. We live in scary times, and I think things are going to get worse before they get better, right? Worse before they get better. Right. All right, so let's take a look at what our topics are for today. I've got a long list, if I remember right. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about stuff going on in the world. We haven't done that in a while, and I keep promising to talk about Afghanistan, so I want to talk quickly about Afghanistan. I want to give you a quick update about Cuba, or at least I don't really have an up-to-date update, but at least what my thoughts about what's going on in Cuba and the sad circumstances that are happening there. A quick update on Hong Kong, just an article I read today about Hong Kong. I want to say something more about the opioid crisis, just again, a short point, hopefully. So again, this is why I put a lot in here. And then I don't know if we'll get to this topic. It's a bigger topic, so we might have to dedicate just a show to this. I do want to talk about this news about the government basically advising Facebook about what it considers misinformation with regard to COVID and the like. So it's but that can turn into a big topic because it's also related to the Donald Trump lawsuit regarding against the different social media platforms that is basically arguing, at least in one of the arguments, they're arguing that the social media platforms did it under the influence and under pressure from government, which would be censorship. Not sure exactly why you're suing social media companies in that case. Maybe you should sue the government. Maybe you should sue Democrats for that. But anyway, that is relevant. So let's talk about Afghanistan. Afghanistan is as you know, Joe Biden is fulfilling Donald Trump's promise. It's a promise Donald Trump never fulfilled. Actually, it's a promise that Bush, Obama, and Donald Trump didn't fulfill, and Biden is fulfilling. And you'd think the right would be ecstatic about this and compliment Biden for fulfilling a promise made by Donald Trump, one of the promises he didn't fulfill. But of course, that would never happen. And that is to leave Afghanistan and to bring all the troops home from Afghanistan. Now, I'm pro this decision. I think I'm pro this decision in a context, right? So I want to give you a little bit of history and what I think should have happened, why we have troops there to begin with, what should have been done, and given what was done, when they should have been brought home. I don't have the exact number of Americans who have died in Afghanistan, but it is I think 2 or 3 thousand American kids who have died in Afghanistan, and that doesn't count the tens of thousands who've been maimed, who have suffered life-altering injuries, soldiers who've been traumatized by what they've seen in Afghanistan and what they've seen through warfare. The months and months and months that soldiers have been in Afghanistan away from families to serve a mission of failure. So while this is not Biden's defeat, although he still has an opportunity to win it, but he won't. This is not Trump's defeat, although he had an opportunity to turn it around and he didn't. It's not Obama's defeat. It's all of their defeats. It's Bush's, and in some extent it is Obama's and Trump's. But it is a disgrace. It is pathetic that the United States, again, I don't know after how many times, is escaping the battlefield with its tail between its legs, cowered by barbaric insurgents who are militarily much weaker, who do not have the capabilities, the capacities that the United States military has, the strongest, mightiest military force in all of human history, and that the United States is coward, terrified, running. Now, this is a war that should have been won after 3 months. Arguably, this is an occupation that should have never happened. It was never necessary. But even if it happened, it should have been quick. Victory should have been decisive. And the troops should have been brought home 20 years ago. Okay, they only went 20 years ago. 19 years ago. The very idea that American troops have been in Afghanistan for 20 years and have lost, and let's be very clear, they have lost. The mission was to defeat the Taliban, to depose them, to replace them with a democratically elected government, and to sustain that government, to create a sustainable democracy, free country in quotes, in Afghanistan in perpetuity. The United States has lost because it has not achieved any of those aims. The Taliban was never defeated. While we have a democracy in Afghanistan, that democracy will collapse as soon as the United States leaves. The Taliban is about to be victorious. It has already occupied almost half of the country. Most of rural Afghanistan is in the hands of the Taliban. It has not occupied the cities, but it will. And why did those kids die? What was achieved by the U.S. military? What was achieved by invading Afghanistan? Yes, for 20 years. For 20 years, Al-Qaeda did not have a base of operations in Afghanistan. That is what was achieved. It was not the mission exactly. The mission was far more greater than that. But we all know Al-Qaeda will have a military base now in Afghanistan because the Taliban have been the allies in spite of what Trump and Biden promised us. They signed a peace deal with the Taliban. And the Taliban promised. They really did promise. They swore. They signed a piece of paper saying that they would never let Al-Qaeda back in. And they have the audacity to tell us that they believe that has any validity, as any credibility. If the political class in this country was honest, the whole lot of them, right and left, were honest, they would apologize. They would grovel before the families of the kids who died for nothing. They would admit that we have been defeated. They would admit that we achieved nothing. And they would apologize for the unnecessary death and destruction that they brought upon American families. And no, the mission was not to capture Osama bin Laden. The mission was never to capture Osama bin Laden. To capture Osama bin Laden, it wasn't necessary to invade the country. By the time we invaded the country with significant force, Osama bin Laden was no longer in Afghanistan. The mission was to change Afghan society. Osama bin Laden was in Pakistan from middle of 2002 on. It's been well documented. Did we ever penalize Pakistan for hosting bin Laden? No. Nobody cares about the mission. That was never the mission. And indeed, the mission to capture Osama bin Laden was executed by Obama. Did Laura give Obama credit for when he did that? And yet, we were still in Afghanistan when Biden took office. And Biden's taking us out of Afghanistan because that's what everybody's promised to do. And he's fulfilling a promise. He should get credit for that. And I think they should come home. I think they should come home. Now, my view of what should have been done after 9/11, given the fact that the Taliban would not hand over bin Laden, given the fact that the Taliban was hosting bin Laden, given the fact that the Taliban were were philosophical allies and military allies of bin Laden, that the Taliban should have been wiped out. It should have been wiped out quickly, effectively, thoroughly, unequivocally. Bin Laden himself, during the first few months after 9/11, was often in the sightings of the Americans, and they wouldn't shoot because they were afraid of killing civilians. There's a number of stories during that period of time where they could have killed him, and they didn't. They should have gone in there. I don't even think they needed ground troops. They should have gone in there with the full might of the American Air Force. They should have bombed and destroyed and killed as many Taliban politicians, leaders, soldiers. They should have left the place in utter devastation. Now, granted, Afghanistan was already devastated. They should have found bin Laden and everybody associated with him, and killed them. They should have, you remember that, they should have destroyed all the camps. They should have gone after the Taliban wherever they were and killed them. And they should have done that primarily from the air. They should have taken sides. They shouldn't have tried to bring democracy to Afghanistan. They shouldn't have had massive aid. We should have had massive numbers of ground troops, maybe some special forces. They should have devastated anything the Taliban touched. And that's it. And come home. And basically said a very simple message. You attack us again, or you facilitate an attack against us again, or you host people that attack us again. This is what happens to you. Don't do it. Instead, we've been there for 20 years. Hundreds of kids, maybe several thousands dead. And now we run home with the tail between our legs. I mean, we have to. I'm not saying there's any alternative at this point, given that we're not willing to fight, given they're not willing to actually defeat the enemy. I mean, you still could do. I mean, somebody asked me last night, well, what would you do in Afghanistan? I said, yeah, it's easy. I would take the next 3 months and I would flatten anything that seemed like the Taliban. I would kill as many of them as possible. I would bomb them. I would find their leaders. I would kill their leadership completely. Political leaders, military leaders. I would kill them. I would destroy them. I would devastate them. All their bases, all their operations. Again, we have the military capacity to do it. And then, in one big swoop, I'd bring all the troops home. But then, I would bring them home as a victor, not as somebody who's been thoroughly, unequivocally, completely destroyed. That's what I would do. That's what it means to have an America First foreign policy. That's what it means to fight a war. That's what it means to win. That's what it means to be an egoist. It means not to tolerate people who want to kill you. Not to tolerate people who want to kill you. And in foreign policy, that means if somebody comes and goes to war with you, kill them, destroy them. And by the way, if you did that in Afghanistan, the Iranians would suddenly go, whoops, oh no, nuclear weapons? No, we're not interested in that. Forget it. We have no interest in it. If you just did it once, people would take notice. They would take notice. They don't want to die. Most of them. They don't want to die. All right. So, I mean, the American military is just, and you could blame Biden or you could blame the generals. I don't know who you want to blame. You can blame them all. I think they're all at fault here. They're all pathetic and ridiculous. But just not only are they leaving Afghanistan the way they're leaving, but it really is tail between the legs. So they evacuated the Bagram Air Force Base. They did in the middle of the night. They didn't even tell their own Afghan troops because they were afraid the Afghans were in cahoots with the Taliban. So they just evacuated, and the looters came in the next day and looted the Air Force Base. That's how American leaves. It's Saigon, the last helicopter leaving the roof of Saigon. I give Biden credit. This will be unusual, but I will give him credit for this. That they are evacuating all the translators. So one of the horrible things that the Trump administration did is they would not protect the people who worked with the Americans in Iraq and in Syria, and they didn't guarantee them protection. So when they wouldn't say that if the American troops left, they would basically take them with. It looks like they are going to take about 1,000 of these Afghans who worked closely with the American military and provide them with visas to come to the United States and hopefully ultimately get them here and get them to safety. Get them to safety, because it would be treasonous. It would be just disgusting if we abandoned the people who actually helped us, whether our cause was the right cause or not. So it saddens me to see the American military in such a pathetic state, where this is how they're leaving a country, and they've learned nothing from how they left Beirut. They've learned nothing from how they left how they left time and time again the different battlefields. Anyway, and again, I don't think this is Democrat, Republican. I think they're both epochs in both their houses. They're both awful when it comes to this. Completely awful when it comes to this. Neither party wanted to win and then leave, right? And leave. We should have left. We should have left in 2002. We should have arrived, destroyed, and left. I don't believe in building up countries. If an enemy is identified, crush them and leave. All right, let's see. All right, before we go to... Well, let's talk about Cuba quickly. A lot of, good news coming out of Cuba. Not really good news, but good news in the sense that for the first time in memory, in a long time, Cubans are railing against the government. They're demonstrating against the government. They're being courageous and brave, and they're advocating for change, and they're going into the streets. The Cuban regime has learned that the way to deal with this, it's had a number of different lessons. It saw how Eastern Europe folded, and how Eastern Europe, completely replaced its regimes and completely folded. And they've also seen how Venezuela has handled this. And the Venezuela example is the one that they've chosen. The Venezuela example is, don't give in. The demonstrations are there, beat them up. They'll come back, keep beating them up. People are poor and starving, let them get poor and starving. Keep at it. Don't give them, and whatever money you have, spend it on thugs that can beat up the demonstrators. Keep beating the demonstrators up. Don't use the army. Pay thugs to do it. Use a mercenary force of the kind of thugs that that guy wanted to use against me, right? And just pound the demonstrators down and make them lose confidence that they can win. And since nobody will help them, nobody will support them, just keep at them until their willpower is broken, as in a sense the willpower of the opposition in Venezuela has been broken. And what you're going to see is an attempt by the Cuban regime just to hold on, to keep pounding. They don't care about lives. They don't care about the levels of poverty. They don't care. The only thing they care about is power, is maintaining power, is the communist regime in Cuba maintaining power. And it's not, this power is not just that it's associated with a life of privilege in the proper sense, a life of some level of wealth. It's not about the money. It's about the power. These bastards are power hungry. They have at their disposals, goons who will do their bidding. The regime in Cuba is evil and a monstrosity, and they will hold on to power no matter what, at anybody's expense, no matter how many people have to be killed or beaten or maimed. They will hold on to power, and they will not give it up, no matter how many people go out in the streets. The only way a revolution in Cuba or in Venezuela can succeed is if force is used, if violence is used against the regime, against the people holding on to power. That is the only way they will give up power. And unfortunately, both in Cuba and in Venezuela, the military has sided with the status quo. The military has not joined the people who are pro-revolution, partially because they're afraid of what will happen to them afterwards. So the military holds a balance of power, and so far the military has sided with the authoritarian brutes. And the authoritarian brutes know this, so they basically grant most of the wealth benefit of being an authoritarian goes to the military. So the military generals make a fortune. Nobody else does. So it's truly depressing to read what's going on in Cuba. The Biden administration has been not bad on this. It could be better, but it's been not bad. It's condemned communism. It's condemned authoritarianism. It's condemned the regime. It's supported the demonstrators. It's condemned violence against the demonstrators. It has taken the right stand. Again, weak and not as authoritative as they should be. But I think some of you thought that maybe Biden would come out in favor of communism and support the communist regime in Cuba. He hasn't done that. I never expected him to, but he hasn't done that. I think some of you would have expected him, and he is, and as a consequence, Cuba's not going to get help from the United States, but neither did Venezuela, and yet they still survive somehow. They still survive. I think right now both Venezuela and Cuba are probably benefiting from. They probably benefit some from Iran. Iran probably sends them something, but given how poor Venezuela is and the fact that they don't have any oil, given how poor Cuba is, it's really going to be a challenge to see how these regimes survive, just from a existential sense, just in terms of feeding themselves, given the whoops, what happened? All right, got it. That they survive given that they have no sources of income, zero. It's going to be, it could get really tragic where people are literally dying of starvation. That could be the case already in Venezuela. We don't know that much about what's going on everywhere in Venezuela. And it certainly could ultimately evolve into what happens in Cuba unless the United States intervenes in some way or another. All right, let's see. All right, let's add quickly just some commentary on Hong Kong, just something I read today, which I thought was pretty interesting. So just so you know, there is a steady now stream of people leaving Hong Kong. I mean, people thought maybe some people would leave, but it wouldn't have a long-term impact. No, the population of Hong Kong is potentially shrinking in the sense that thousands of people. It's not like leaving California and New York. This is much bigger, much more substantial. It's primarily the if you will, the man of ability who's leaving, people who have the means to leave, but thousands of people now are leaving Hong Kong. Hong Kong, this is going to come down as one of the great tragedies of Western civilization. Hong Kong is just going to be emptied out of talent, of skill, of ability. People are leaving because they don't want to live under a Chinese regime. Many of them escaped China to come to Hong Kong to live under freedom. Now Hong Kong is becoming China. China is basically imposing itself on Hong Kong completely and unequivocally. It truly is. The news about Hong Kong just gets sadder and sadder every time I read a story. Hold 1 second, guys. There seems to be somebody at my door, so 1 second. All right, sorry about that. Some roof service in my hotel room. All right, so truly sad and truly tragic what's going on in Hong Kong, and thousands of people are leaving. I saw a story with kind of the numbers and the scope of this, and I didn't realize the extent to which it is happening, but it is happening. There's no question now. People don't want to leave, don't want to live, particularly people who've lived under freedom, who know what freedom is. Businesses are leaving, individuals are leaving, and I only think this is going to intensify over time. All right, let's see. Let's do a few super chat questions. We got some biggies, and then we'll go back to the topics at hand. All right, Dave asks $100. Wow, thank you, Dave. Dave is a big supporter of the show. Ayn Rand said feelings are not tools of cognition, but she also said to really know something is true, you have to feel it in your body, not as a detached data point. When you engage in introspection, you're observing your feelings and motivations to uncover the truth. Okay, I'm not sure where the question is here, so let me dissect. Let's go over this. Ayn Rand said feelings are not tools of cognition. They're not. The feelings provide you with information about your response to something. Why you're responding, you have to figure out. Whether the response is appropriate, you have to figure out. But feelings are just a response. She also said to really know something is true, you have to feel it in your body. I mean, you have to know it. You have to integrate it. And ultimately, if you do the integrations right, your feelings will align with your reasoning. But at the end of the day, to know something is true is to know it rationally, based on the facts. And it sometimes can take a while before your emotions catch up, before, in a sense, you feel it in your body. Right? It is true that it shouldn't be detached. It should be, and in that sense, it needs to be integrated. But it's integrated into your system of knowledge. It integrated into everything that you know. And when you make it integrated, then your emotions will follow as well. Then your emotions will catch up. But it can take a long time. And it requires work. And it requires introspection. Now, introspection is not emotions. Introspection is how you discover why you're feeling it, what exactly you're feeling, why you think what you think. It's you observing your own motivations, your own feelings, your thought process from within. But the relationship between feelings and cognition is that feelings are consequences of previous conclusions. And the only way to get rid of those feelings, if they're inappropriate, is to redo those conclusions. And sometimes it requires literally undoing the old conclusions. And sometimes you did those when you're a child and you don't even know why you did them. And that's why it's so hard sometimes. But the more you come to the right conclusions, the more truth you discover, the more you integrate that truth into the rest of your body, of your knowledge, the more your emotions, the more your body will align with the rest. All right, let's see if there's another $20 question. We're doing $20 questions, get priority, so I'm doing $20 questions on this break, and then we'll go back to the topics, and then I'll do everything else at the end. Oh yeah, Scott, did you see the comment recently by Jackie Chan that he loves the Communist Party and would love to be a member? Considering his insane success in America, I find it strange. I mean, I find it very strange. I mean, Jackie Chan doesn't strike me as I don't know. I don't understand it. I thought he was originally from Hong Kong. Maybe he needs to say this in order to feel safe in Hong Kong. Maybe he needs to say it because he's worried about his family, who might be still in China or in Hong Kong. I don't know, but it is insanity for Jackie Chan to say that. Now, it's not insanity because how can Jackie Chan be a communist because he succeeded in the U.S.? Because remember, I don't think the Communist Party is communist. I don't think there's anything communist about the Communist Party other than the authoritarian thugs. They're brutes. The regime in China is much more fascist than it is communist. But for Jackie Chan to say this, having lived under freedom in the United States, having lived under freedom in Hong Kong, and knowing what the Chinese regime is doing to its own people in China and what it's doing in Hong Kong, that requires massive evasion, or just a person who doesn't believe in freedom, doesn't want freedom, doesn't like freedom, and yeah, my respect for Jackie Chan has gone, off the cliff. It's truly horrific, truly horrific. For somebody to know freedom and to just throw it out like that. I mean, if you don't know freedom, you never lived under it, if you don't realize what is possible under freedom, because you're stuck in some hellhole in the world, so be it. But he's from Hong Kong. And he's lived in the United States or been here a lot. He knows the importance of freedom. Brian Chi asks, where's the line cut of advocating violence for communist intellectuals? At what point should Marx have gone to prison? If not, how should his ilk be punished in a just society? It shouldn't. I mean, the way to punish a Karl Marx in a just society is social ostracism. Social ostracism. That's what you do. You don't, if I knew somebody was a communist, I wouldn't employ him. I wouldn't trade with him. I wouldn't go into their store. I wouldn't sell them stuff in my store. I wouldn't bake them a cake. I would ignore them. But you cannot use force. They have a right to hold whatever ideas they want. They have a right to, to teach whatever they want, to say whatever they want. They can't literally, but it has to be literal, incite violence, not even preach violence. You can preach violence. You can write Mein Kampf, in which you say, I'm going to kill all the Jews. But you can't incite it. You can't take a mob and say, let's go kill all the Jews. That's a violation of the First Amendment. That's a violation of free speech. But this issue of free speech is crucial, even with your enemies, even with your worst enemies. But it would be great if we lived in a society. See, I'm a big believer in a proper cancel culture, right? I'm all for canceling. I'm all for ostracizing people, firing people, not associating with people, not baking people cakes. I'm all for a proper, rational culture of canceling if it's done by the private sector without the use of force. So if I had an employee who I discovered was a communist, they're gone. If I had an employee if I was baking a cake for a wedding and I discovered the two people getting married were communists, I'd say go to another bakery. Right? So, the essence of canceling people because they have ideas that to you are abhorrent is not wrong. What's wrong about what the left is doing is that the ideas that they view as abhorrent, it's ridiculous, they're not. And the cases in which they cancel people are absurd and stupid even by their own standards. Cancel culture is private. Now, you can complain about it because of the irrationality of it, but not because of the phenomena itself. I will answer all the Super Chat questions, but I only answer the under $20 ones after I finish covering the topics that I have. If you want priority for your questions to be answered, I assume this is anonymous, although I don't see your question, then you have to put $20 on them. Otherwise, I start with the $20 questions and we get to those later on. But I will answer every Super Chat question that's been asked. That I will do, I promise. So that's what I would do. Reuters headline, Cubans protest increased COVID. I understand constantly tracking attacking the media is pointless, but you rarely focus on it. Why? Don't you think the media actively undermines individualism, egoism, and capitalism? Yeah, I mean, yes. Now, here's the question. Is that the only Reuters story about Cuba? Does Reuters write a story about Cuban protests that didn't mention COVID? Did it write a story about the brutality with which the Cuban regime attacks the people? So, I mean, you've got to be careful also about not... You put $20 on it. Can you repeat the question in the chat here? Because I don't see a $20 question from Anonymous. I don't see any questions from Anonymous user. So can you just, I believe you that you asked it, so can you put can you just ask it again? Sorry. Are you the one about Nigartano? You just say yes or no if you're the question about Nigartano. Maybe I didn't do the translation, the currency translation right, because I think that was one in a different currency. What am I doing here? All right, we're getting a bunch of $20 questions. I'm never getting my topics. Let's see, and this one, all right. Brian Cheese says, surely if something, in terms of media. No, so I think the media is awful. I think the media is terrible. There's a sense in which I find it boring to attack the media. I could attack the media. I just find it boring because almost everything they say is wrong and stupid and offensive and made up. But I also think that a lot of the attacks on the media are unfair in terms of they're selective, right? You can find all the things that are wrong. And that's why I asked about the Cuba. Did they do other stories about Cuba? And if they did, then what's fair is to put that into the context. Of course, if the only thing they've written about Cuba is the relationship of the protest to COVID, then that's horrible. But if they've also done other stories, and this is just one of the stories, one of the stupid stories they do, then fine. But so you have to be objective in attacking the media. I find it that it's often difficult to do, but I just don't. I find it boring. I mean, pick any headline anywhere in the news, any story, and I'll show you how nonsensical it is. I do this every day, but to just string a bunch of headlines and say, see, the media is corrupt and stupid. All right, it bores me. It's not that it's not true. If the word, wait a second, there's a thing here related to something I said before. Brian Chi asks, surely if something continuously leads to violence, it should be stopped after a certain momentum. No, not the advocacy for it. It should be combated intellectually, but this is true of Christianity has continuously led to violence. Continuously. For hundreds of years, it led to violence. Should it have been stopped, Christianity? I mean, the religious wars of the 16th century, should Christianity be banned because it led to violence? I mean, anytime people preach Nazism, ultimately it's going to lead to violence. Should Nazism be banned? And where do you put the line? Should Islam leads to violence. Should we ban Islam? Marxism leads to violence. Ban Marxism. Ayn Rand's argument is that Kant ultimately has to lead to violence. Do we ban Kant and not teach him in schools? You can't do that. What you ban is the violence. And what you put in prison are the people. And the people who incite directly the violence. And that's all a government can do. That's the only reason to use force, is when force is applied against you. There's never an excuse to use force otherwise. Otherwise you lose the principle, which is the way you deal with people is through reason, including people who are unreasonable. But you never use force against them. Again, unless they're using force. And this is the huge mistake of people turning to fascism in order to combat communism. Turning to communism in order to combat fascism. Turning to one form of force to combat another form of force. No, what we advocate is for freedom. Freedom means people are going to hold stupid ideas. Freedom means people are going to advocate for really bad ideas. They're going to teach really, really bad ideas. Now, if I believe that my ideas are better, my ideas are right, and their ideas are wrong, unjust, impractical, destructive, then I win. I will win. It just will take time. But I will win. But if I resort to force, then I'm one of them. Because now I think that it's okay to use force against somebody who's not using force against me, who's just speaking. Now, if you're interested in this topic, I've done many, many talks and many, many shows on the principle of free speech and its importance. And just look up on YouTube, Yaron Brook, free speech. Maybe I'll do another show on that, because maybe there's still need for more of this, it looks like from the questions. If the word censor is not an appropriate word for what social media does to stifle opinion they don't like, what is the correct word? Stifling? You just used it. Stifling. Silencing. On their platform, at least. Restricting. Deplatforming. I mean, any one of those words. Stifling speech on their platform. Restricting. See, I don't see a problem with social media restricting speech on their platform, right? I might think that they use it inappropriately, that they're stifling the wrong speech. And remember, you only hear, again, I hate to be the bearer of objective information, but all you hear is when a conservative or somebody on the right is kicked off of Twitter. But what about all the people on the left who've been kicked off of Twitter? I mean, do you know that they exist? Yeah, they do exist. There are quite a few of them. And yet you don't hear that. Twitter has standards. I don't agree with their standards. I don't think the standards are good. But they have standards. I think we all have standards. Everybody has standards. I wish we had social media with better standards. I'd advocate for social media with better standards. Maybe Iran should go on the offensive and call for a specific debate on the Miami condo collapse. All right. Come debate me, people. I don't know who. Sam Seda, you want to do another round two on the Miami condo collapse? We'd be happy to do it. We've got more information now. There seems to be a timeline of what happened. Let's debate it. I'm not sure what the debate is about. The facts are pretty evident. Would more government regulations, is it appropriate? Is it an appropriate response or not? Would that be the debate? So I'm happy to do that. Right? Yeah, Twitter is biased because the culture is biased. Twitter is biased. Facebook's biased. They're all biased. But they also deplatform leftists. they have standards that are bias standards. I don't like their standards. Okay. I don't think it's that big of a deal. What I think is a big deal is when the government gets involved. That to me is when it becomes a big deal. OMG Puppies asks, Facebook newsfeed is all recommended things I don't want and not things my friends post. On Twitter, users invented the hashtag and Twitter used to post top trending tags. Now what's happening is all curated and manipulative. Yeah, they got significantly criticized for creating these echo chambers around hashtags and trending tags. And there was criticism from other media forums. There was criticism across the board. So they started curating it and manipulating it. You know, and again, the solution is don't use their platform. Switch platforms. Right? My news feed is usually my friends' posts. I don't get other news feeds. I only get friends' posts. The advertising is usually things that are relevant to me. So I'm not sure why your Facebook page is like that, but mine functions the way I'd expect. Now, I don't really do anything on Facebook, so I don't care because I'm not on Facebook really. I have a presence, but I don't do anything. I advertise the show basically. But when I do go on the feed, it's stuff I expect there to be there. At least for me. Okay, Stone. Wow. RON. What's RON? What currency is that? RON. I don't know. He says he just arrived, and I don't know how much 99.99 RONs are. I'm curious. Hello, I just arrived home, tired, and have no questions right now. I am just sending this in support of the show. Thank you. By the way, my opinion about Jackie Chan's declaration is that it is an expression of his nationalism. That's a good point. I think that's right. And that relates to the point I made that the Communist Party in China is much more fascist than it is communist. And in that sense, it feeds off of the nationalism more than it feels off of an appeal to communism, to egalitarianism in any way, or to the what do you call it, proletarian. Okay, Dean says he paid $25 on PayPal last show for a question and didn't answer. It's too long for Super Chat. Could you check it out, please? Is this the question? Let me just see. Is the question about the debate with Sam Seda and about regulation? Just say in the chat here if that is the question or not. John says, thanks. You have had a significant positive impact on my life. I appreciate that. Thank you. Dean, let me know if it's the question about regulation. If so, I can answer it now. Oh, it's Romanian Lou. OK Stone is in Romania. You should invite me to come speak in Romania. I may be close there. Okay. Yes. Okay. So I will. I'll get to that in a second. So that'll be the second. I do want to answer this question because it was asked early, and it's a $20 question. I didn't realize it, so I Anonymous was upset at me. So let me get to this question. Thoughts on Nick Gaetano's art. My favorite work is The Virtue of Selfishness. The elements of what Nick Gaetano does that I like, and the elements I don't like. I like the sharp colors, the drama that he creates, the simplicity, and Gaetano is the one who did the covers for a series of Iron Man books, including famously Atlas Shrugged. He uses a lot of yellows and reds, I think, and he's got the Atlas kneeling with the globe on his back. So I'm not a huge fan. To me, it's more illustration than fine art, but it's it's fairly good. I like it. It's good as book covers because it catches your attention. It's very good at grabbing your attention, and in that sense, it's very good as illustration, as book cover art. So I think it worked really well for. I don't remember the Virtue of Selfishness one specifically, but they all are very striking. So if you walk into a bookstore, you're going to notice them. They're going to jump at you. In that sense, they serve their purpose. But that's the sense in which they're illustrative. They're not deep. They're not things you contemplate. I, for one, wouldn't have them on the wall in a sense of something I would contemplate, something that would have a lasting impact on me. I think it's, the Virtue of Selfishness is the staircase. Yeah, I like that. It's a good cover for a book. I wouldn't hang it on my wall. It's not great art. It's great illustration, and it's certainly great book illustration. Okay, let's do this question by Dean. Hey, Ron, big fan. I heard your debate with Sam Cedar, and I'm struggling with the idea of no government regulation at all. I agree that markets will fix themselves in time, and it's a company that cuts corners and hurts its clients will eventually run out of business. But my question is how many people have to die before the market will adjust to those bad, irrational companies? Whether it's a building or medicine, isn't it better to try and put a safety net in place that will try to minimize damage to other individuals that trusted those companies in the first place? Isn't it right to assume that less people die because of certain government regulations than without any government regulations? Those regulations could stop a company from hurting individuals in the first place instead of hurting and then waiting for the market to adjust. I know regulations don't protect 100%, but still sorry for the long question. No, it's a good question. Thank you for asking. It's the kind of a question that anybody introduced to these ideas would have. And let me give you kind of an answer on several layers of answer. And of course, it's hard to answer this just in a question. I mean, this justifies a whole show or several shows on this because it's a big issue, and to really do it justice would require a lot of time and a lot of detail and a lot of examples. But let's deal with it at the fundamental basis, at the abstract level, at the level of principle first, and then I want to give you a bunch of examples. Because, look, the moral is the practical, and the practical is the moral. And from a moral perspective, the government has no role to play, from a moral perspective, in voluntary transactions, as long as no fraud or violence or corruption has happened. Now, we could argue that some of your examples that you give fraud did happen, and the government does have a role, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the principle is here that the government, unless there is clear evidence of risk, of danger, of negligence, or a particular technology is being deployed that has significant and dramatic risks. So you could argue about nuclear power or something like that. Or there's a big crane building a skyscraper, there's a big crane and it's leaning funny. Then yeah, somebody complaining about it, the government has a role, just like it has a role if you're weaving in and out of lanes while driving, to stop you and say you're driving dangerously and test to see if you're drunk or something. But you know, so driving in a reckless manner would be a violation of rights. Building a building in a reckless manner would be a violation of rights. But there has to be reason for them to come in and inspect. There has to be some evidence to suggest that there is negligence happening or there is something bad happening. The principle is that the government cannot barge onto your property and just say, we're here to inspect. Why? Because some people do a lousy job building buildings, and we're just assuming you might be one of them, so we're here to inspect. You have sovereignty over your own life. You have sovereignty over your own property. The government has no It's immoral for the government, and therefore wrong for the government, to break that sovereignty, even if they're doing it for, quote, a good cause. And there are horrific consequences when they do that. You give drugs, example. I believe that the mechanisms by which the government uses, for example, to decide what drugs are safe and what are not safe, probably kills hundreds of thousands of people a year because of the drugs we don't have, because of the things they don't permit, because of the cost runs that they create. I believe that much of the building regulations that exist out, supposedly for safety, make it impossible to have low-income housing and have created, to some extent at least, the homelessness problem. So there are massive negative consequences for the government violating our rights. And those negative consequences have to do with wrong buildings, too few buildings, too expensive buildings, homelessness, too few drugs. Maybe the drugs are safe, but drugs that could cure massive diseases, they just don't exist because they can't get through the FDA. Because they have an incentive to be overly risk averse. So the damage that they do far exceeds the good that they do. And that's the sense in which the moral is the practical is the moral. The fact that it's immoral causes damage. But the immorality is associated with the fact that unless they have probable cause, a reason to believe that you are cheating, a reason to believe you're engaging in risky, irresponsible behavior, they have no business in your life. You are an independent, sovereign entity. And the government has no business in your life unless you're a threat to other people. But the burden of proof is on them, not on you. So how would the market deal with all this? I mean, do we really have to wait until the building collapses and the builder is sued and then other builders pay attention? No, of course not. The market will develop mechanisms to monitor the quality of drugs and to monitor the quality of buildings that are far greater and far more sensitive to market pressures and far more sensitive to values of individuals than anything the government can produce. And I've given some examples of this, but I'll repeat. So for example, you're building a building. Well, a few things happen when you build a building. You have to take out a loan to build the building. Maybe a long-term mortgage on the building. It might be a construction loan that then is rolled into some kind of mortgage if you're going to rent it out, if you're going to rent the apartments out. Well, the bank has an incentive that this building survive. And this building is built well because if the building collapses, they won't get their money back. So the bank has an incentive to have experts that it assigns review your plans, maybe even go to the construction site and check up on whether you're executing based on plans. When you build a building like this, in order for tenants to actually be willing to buy, you're going to have to provide insurance. You're going to have to buy insurance on the building. And as you're building it, against accidents and against the ultimate occurrence that something happens once you finish the building, you need to be covered. So you buy insurance. Well, the insurance company now has a strong incentive, again, particularly in a free market where they're not going to be bailed out and there's no government regulators doing this. The insurance company sends inspectors to supervise. When I am going to buy a condo, one of the first things I do is ask, is there insurance on the building? Who's the insurance with? Can I see the insurance policy? Oh, but you might say, Yaron, you're sophisticated. You know these things. What about unsophisticated people who buy condos? Well, people like that usually buy a condo with a mortgage, and then the bank asks for it. Haven't you ever seen where a bank says, we won't give you a mortgage unless you have insurance? So you have to have the insurance, and the insurance company has a strong incentive to make sure that the building is right. Now, you can extrapolate this to, let's say, to drugs. Let's say there was no FDA. Any drug company could issue any drug, anything. They claim anything they wanted. And everybody's very confused about this. And everybody's very worried about this. And who would be confused and worried first? Well, doctors, for example, would be worried because how do they check? The insurance, the drug company is saying this, but do I know it's true? And has it been tested? And hasn't been checked? How do I know? There's no FDA. Now, first, they could ask the drug company to send their academic papers or the test results or things like that. But doctors are busy. They don't have time to check up on these drugs themselves. So what would they do? So imagine I'm an entrepreneur and I go around and I tell doctors, look, I'm going to offer you this service. I am going to get the drugs from all these drug companies and I am going to test them. I'm going to run trials. I'll test them. And I will issue you a report on every one of these drugs, what the side effects are. Is it safe? Does it actually do what they claim it does? On what percentage of patients? I will give you a comprehensive analysis of this drug. And what I need for you is to subscribe to my service. You can subscribe. You pay, $1,000 a year or $10,000 a year. I don't know how much it would cost, whatever. They're doctors, they've got money. So $10,000 a year, and you will get this service. And if I screw up, guess what? There are 5 other competitors out there who are eager to take the business from me if I screw up. So competition is constantly driving us to get this right, to get it accurate. If I don't do the testing right, or if I rate a drug as poor and it turns out the drug is good, I suffer in a competitive marketplace. So that's one. Now, remember also the drug companies buy insurance. They have bondholders. Both bondholders and insurance companies don't want the insurance companies to sell a drug that might hurt people. Assuming even the drug company wants that. Drug companies don't want it. So they have an incentive to insist that the drug company do trials and do a good job and monitor and control. So in other words, the market will self-regulate. Markets are brilliant at it. And an example of this right now is electricity, electrical products, electrical goods. A toaster. I mean, I don't think you know what a toaster is. But I don't know. When you plug the Alexa into the plug, how come it doesn't blow up? How come people almost never get electrocuted at home anymore? Well, most of that is a consequence of the fact that there's a private regulatory system, completely private, that basically all electric builders of electrical products send their products through and they test it and they give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. And Best Buy won't buy a product from you, the manufacturer, without Underwriter's Lab. Thank you. It's Underwriter's Lab. Without Underwriter Lab, thumbs up. So Best Buy, Walmart, all these companies won't sell you a good. Amazon won't sell you an electrical good without a thumbs up from the Underwriter Lab. Completely private. So those are some of the mechanisms. And I'll say this too, and this is important. One of the amazing things about markets is that it's impossible to predict how they'll deal with these issues. And often they will surprise you, and often they will innovate in ways that you can't imagine. They'll create things that you can't imagine. So I'm just giving you my assessment of what I think are the minimal things that the market will do, but the market will come up with even better things, with even more magnificent things, with even more inspiring things to deal with this issue related to safety. Right? So it's morally wrong and it's practically wrong. Government does. So you say something like, well, doesn't the government save some lives? No. It actually kills people and it turns them homeless. Government kills people. Regulations kill people. They destroy wealth. They make you poorer. They create homeless people. They don't allow for the creation of goods and products that would benefit your life enormously. They actually make the world much worse. Markets would make the world much better and much safer. At least as safe as we as consumers are interested in making it. Because 100% safety is not necessarily a value. All right, Jennifer says, if the FDA is so wonderful, why did they approve Oxycontin, etc. in the first place? No one asked that. Yes, but of course, Oxycontin, first of all, is not that big of a problem. It's a painkiller. It's addictive, but again, it's shocking to me that anybody thought it wasn't. It's an opioid. It's not that they approve stuff that's sometimes bad. That's not my complaint against the FDA, because those drugs would have been probably approved in a private market as well. It's that they don't approve a million drugs that would have been good. It's what we don't see that's really the evil of the FDA. Okay, Tor puts in $50. Thank you, Tor. He says, Hi, I'm from Cuba. Thanks for speaking about Cuba. My family is still there. I'm sorry to hear that. What do you think about the relationship between collectivism versus sense of connection with others, or collectivism versus compassion? Maybe something about the relationship between those, and then it ended. Sorry, I didn't get the rest of the question. All right, but let me, maybe that was it. Maybe among those, maybe you intended there to be a period there. I think collectivism destroys sense of connection. And collectivism destroys one's ability to be compassionate. Collectivism is the idea that you should live for the group. That the group is should be your standard of value. That what's good for, quote, good for the group is what is important, is what is valuable, is what is meaningful. That your life only means something in the context of the group. Now, I think that breeds resentment towards others. Because you're telling me that my happiness is not important. These other people's happiness is important. Why? You're telling me that I should make decisions, and all decisions should be made not based on what's good for me, but what's good for the group. Why? You're basically telling me that my relationship with other people is zero sum. That anything that they gain, anything that I gain is at their expense. And therefore, I should not gain. I should give to them. That's what collectivism demands. Well, I resent them then because I don't have stuff. Collectivism breeds resentment. It makes you suspicious of other people, dislike other people, because they are the standard by which decisions are being made, not you. You're being sacrificed to them. That's the nature of collectivism. And therefore, you feel no compassion towards them. You dislike them. It is indeed the egoist who values other people, who's interested in connecting with other people, not as a sacrifice, not just for the sake of whatever, for the sake of the group, but because he sees others as real values, as traders with him. Not all others, but many. So the egoist looks at other people and sees producers. The egoist looks at other people and sees traders. The collectivist looks at other people and sees moochers, because they are mooching off of him. This is what the welfare state does. He sees people living off of him, people he's expected to sacrifice towards, and he resents them. The egoist loves them because they're creating values that he benefits from. And the same with compassion. The egoist sees somebody suffering and the other is a productive, is a productive trader, is a value to him. Therefore he cares. But if the other is a moocher, a looter, somebody that I'm expected to sacrifice towards, I don't care if he suffers. He deserves it, right? That's the attitude. So collectivists and collectivist societies are always less benevolent, less compassionate, less friendly, less inviting than individualist societies. This is why America has always been so welcoming and so benevolent and so friendly and so nice, because it's been so individualistic. And as that individualism is sucked out of American society, so will the goodwill, so will the pleasantness, whatever. So, I hope that answers your question, and I hope your family stays safe in Cuba and that they manage to escape. It turns out that the Biden administration is now saying that they will turn back Cubans who leave Cuba. I can't think of anything more evil than that. That is just so evil. People escaping tyranny, and you would send them back, right? FDR sent Jews back to World War II, and we have a long history of doing this, but it's still, every time I see it, I still find it so disgusting and so horrific. All right, let's see. Let's do some super chat. I won't get to the rest of the topics. I'll do them another time. What are the major differences between Nietzsche and Rand's philosophies? I'd say I was just listening to a lecture on Nietzsche. The big difference is the role of reason in human life. Nietzsche downplays the role of reason. In contrary, he associates the role of reason with bad things. Ayn Rand views reason as central to human life, as required for human life, as the way in which one lives a moral life. For Nietzsche, you have to listen to your body. In other words, you have to listen to your will, or in other words, you have to listen to your emotions. And you're driven by your emotions. You're driven by your body, by your instinct, and not by reason. He rejects reason as the standard for living. And that's a big difference, because the idea of reason as man's basic means of survival, the idea of reason as your cardinal value, one of the three cardinal values, the idea of reason as really the idea of man as a being of reason, as a rational animal, is the core, the basis on which we derive rights, the idea of rights, the idea of force being wrong, because force negates reason. So once you take reason out of philosophy, objectivism, you basically emptied objectivism from one, if not the most important concepts it has, and that's what Nietzsche doesn't have that. So it's a fundamental, deep, and kind of difference that impacts all their thinking. They're thinking about everything. All right. Michael says, altruism seems to largely sway people in terms of how they vote. But in their personal lives, I don't see altruism playing a huge role in day-to-day dealings with one another. It's huge. Huge, Michael. Think of the guilt people feel for pursuing their own lives, for pursuing their own interests, and not becoming Mother Teresa. So it affects them psychologically enormously. You see that in older people who have been successful but unhappy and riddled with guilt. You see it on all the fake charity that they do to buy themselves into heaven. It's all over their personal lives. It affects them emotionally and their ability to be happy, and they deny themselves happiness because who deserves to be happy? I pursued self-interest in my life. So guilt and the inability to be happy is the real, but even with dealing with other people, how many times don't you want to do something and you do something because you feel bad for other people? And it could be family. How many times altruistically do you help a family member who you despise? Or do you go to family dinner you don't want to be at? Or you give a loan to a family member who you don't want to help, but altruism drives you to help them, or a coworker. How many times, or even bosses who don't fire employees who need to be fired. That's altruism is everywhere. Once you look at people's individual behavior, it's everywhere. And certainly egoism doesn't replace it, because egoism is the active pursuit of your own self-interest. The rational, active, engaged, focused pursuit. It's Yaron's rules. It's the focused, concentrated, constant valuing of your own life and decision making around what's good for me. Almost nobody does that, including most objectivists. Okay, when you fly business class and people next to you ask you what you do for a living, do you tell them you promote Ayn Rand's ideas or just say you work in finance to avoid the conversation? So it depends. Sometimes I'll say I work in finance to avoid the conversation. Sometimes I'll say I travel around the world speaking, and then they'll ask me about what, and then I'll tell them, and then I'll mention Ayn Rand. So it really depends on how much I really get a sense they want to get into the conversation, how much I want to get into the conversation, how tired I am. So it depends. And since I do so many different things, it's not like I'm lying. I can do so many different things. Okay, let's see. Michael asks, are you surprised Biden actually condemned communism and socialism speech about Cuba? No. I mean, Democrats have been condemning communism and socialism for a long time. And Biden has a strong interest not to be viewed as a socialist. Remember, Elizabeth Warren claimed to be a champion of capitalism, and Biden claimed to be a champion of capitalism when he did the anti-monopoly speech. I mean, it's disgusting because he was clearly anti-capitalist, in the policy he was advocating. But no, I'm not surprised that Biden did it. I think he also knows he has to do it politically. Most of the people voting for him did not vote for him as a socialist. They don't want him there as a socialist. They want him there as a relative moderate. And while he might not be governing in a particular moderate fashion, he has to talk the talk. He has to pretend to be a moderate. Otherwise, he'll never get reelected. And he knows it. He knows he got all those votes only because he was running against Trump and because he was viewed as a moderate. Whether he is or not is a different story, but viewed as one. Okay. Toro-san asked another $20 question. That was great. Thank you. I love your show and your university talks. I'm glad I discovered objectivism. Me too. Me too. And again, I hope you get your family out of Cuba safely. Let's see. Let's see. Next super chat question. Michael, again, what's the most you've ever paid per night at a hotel? God, $1,200 a night, I think. Something like that. Maybe probably something like that at the Four Seasons in maybe less, because it was the Four Seasons, but it was Thailand. It was either the Four Seasons in Thailand or the St. Regis in Bora Bora. One of those. So like over around $1,000, I think is the most I paid a night. Okay. Let's see. Harrison Judiet asks, can you review the Golden Age trilogy by Arthur C. Wright? It's some of the most uplifting and inspiring science fi I've ever read since Atlas Shrugged. I haven't read it. If I read it, I'll do it. It's if you're saying it's really inspiring, I'll look for it. Okay, Michael again. California just imposed another mask mandate yet in LA. I can't imagine Americans would tolerate another lockdown being forced to wear diapers on their face. It's ridiculous, and for a variety of reasons. But I don't want to get into COVID now because I have a lot to say. I'll do another show about COVID because what's going on with COVID, not just in America. And again, one of the things you guys need to understand is it's not just in America, it's all over the world. This is not Democrats versus Republicans. This is a global phenomenon. And it's truly scary and horrific and upsetting. I'll have to do a show about it. Linda says, good answer about regulations, many good points. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. Okay, Frank asks for $50. Well, thanks for not hiding your individuality in the mutual rapport of socialism. I'm not sure what you meant by that, but yes. I appreciate the support, Frank. Really appreciate that. That's great. Very generous. Yeah, I mean, I don't hide my individuality when I give answers, right? Or when I speak generally. Brian says national cruise lines are stuck between a rock and a hard place, with Florida finding companies who do discriminate based on vaccines, and the CDC finding companies who don't discriminate based on vaccines. Both the CDC and Florida, the state of Florida, should get out of the business, and the cruise line should choose whether they want to discriminate among people based on vaccines or not. It probably makes sense for them to discriminate, but that's a business decision that is none of the business of Florida or the CDC. Brian says Norwegian is halfway fighting back by suing Florida, while Carnival recently pledged to be carbon neutral by 2050. Do you think the cruise liners will last that long? Doesn't matter if they don't. Well, yeah, it matters. People enjoy cruise lines. It matters for the people who like to go to cruises. I don't. Getting stuck with 10,000 other people on a boat in the middle of the ocean is not my idea of fun. But I know a lot of people who do, and that's great. So to the extent that it's a value to a lot of people, it would be a tragedy if the cruise lines are driven out of business. And will they survive? I don't know. But the funny thing is that the CDC and the state of Florida will go after them and find them. I mean, this is why I don't like de Blasio in Florida is these kind of things. So why are you penalizing cruise lines for discriminating? Why are you anti people who pro-vaccine? It's just let the industry do what the industry does. Let them make choices based on their customers. The CDC should stay out of it, and Florida should stay out of it. And the funny thing is that the CDC in Florida will drive these companies bankrupt, and then the federal government will step in and bail them out, and the state of Florida will be the first in line to argue for the federal government to bail them out, because the state of Florida depends on the cruise industry for so much tax revenue and so many jobs. So there'll be a bailout, and the cruise industry will survive. It will become more expensive to go on a cruise, but it's likely to be bailed out. Too many people like cruises for it not to be bailed out. Half done with Atlas, any significance on why the union boss understood that violence is being used during the Unification Act scene? Yes, I mean, I think Ayn Rand is making the point. She's contrasting him with the intellectuals and the politicians who pretend that their decrees and their ideas do not lead to violence. That oh no, this is just intellectual stuff. Oh no, this is just policy. This is just rules. It's the workers. It's the union thugs fully understand that what this is, because they're materialists, because they're in the world. They're connected to reality in a sense, in a way that the politicians and the intellectuals are not. They get it that these decrees are completely violent. And I think she's trying to differentiate the man of muscle, who in some senses understands more than the men of the so-called mind, who are because the men of the mind are so detached from reality, they don't understand the consequence of their own actions. Anthony says, "Hi, Yaron. What is your view of the company Medtronics?" I don't know Medtronics. Sorry. So you'll have to fill me in, or I'll have to look it up. Marilyn asks, I think Oxycontin is okay when used properly. I'm sure it is. The problem was street use, which was blamed on pharmaceutical companies and doctors. Weren't regulations to blame again? I think so. I have to do a lot more research about the opioid epidemic to figure out exactly what's going on. But there's a lot of arguments in terms of the way. I think I did a show with Amish Adalja on this a while back, a long time ago. And there was something about doctors were by regulation forced to give Oxycontin to certain patients. It was standard care. It was expected. You could argue regulations don't allow for the development of alternative pain medications. FDA blocks them, doesn't approve them. I'm sure there's regulations, and there's a causal relationship between regulations and what happened. It's also the case that people believed, I don't know why, that these drugs that Oxycontin was not as as addictive as it turned out to be. So mistakes were made, and mistakes are going to be made in medicine, and mistakes when they're made in medicine often lead to tragic consequences. But what I find interesting is people are willing to entertain that the doctor's at fault, or that the drug companies at fault. Nobody's willing to entertain the idea the regulations at fault, and certainly nobody's willing to entertain the idea that the users are at fault. The users have to take some responsibility over the stuff they put in their mouth and they digest. Stefan Petit. Remember in Atlas Shrugged when the factory worker used to celebrate when a coworker had a baby? After they were socialized, they resented it. Exactly. And you know, I experienced that directly on a kibbutz. In a kibbutz, everybody hated each other because everything was shared. And because everybody got the same, even though everybody didn't produce the same. So they hated each other. They resented each other. Arthur, $20 question. Hey, Yaron, what are your thoughts on the state of Rhode Island? Oh, wow. I don't have thoughts about the state of Rhode Island. What are my thoughts on the state of Rhode Island? I mean, I'm not generally a big fan of New England. I mean, there's certain things I like, but most of them are in Boston, and that's mostly culture. I find New England gray and depressing and old. The infrastructure a little falling apart, as compared to California, where everything's new and sunny and bright and wide roads and great infrastructure and good. Rhode Island, I think, has a good think tank, free market think tank. I remember that. It has Brown University, a good university, or one of the Ivy Leagues, so a bad university, you could argue. It's heavily regulated. I think taxes are high. That's what comes to mind. I don't. If there's a particular thing you're curious about, I could help you with that, but I don't know. Scott asked, do you agree that Jan Psaki crossed a line in saying people who spread her version of misinformation should be blamed across social media platforms? I don't know, Scott. So let me look into it. I don't know what it's exactly referring to. I don't know what line you would define as crossed, in what sense. Is it a line that put her in jail, or a line that would condemn her morally? Should she be banned? So she thinks that the people who spread her version of misinformation should be banned across social media platforms. It sounds like she crossed the line, but I don't know enough about what happened. So let me. She's Biden's press secretary. Okay. Do you agree that? And you're saying misinformation. You're putting in quotes because she didn't say misinformation. You're saying it's misinformation. She promoted using government to mandate social media bans. Yeah, I mean, a line was definitely, okay, so I know what you're talking about now. A line was definitely crossed. I was going to talk about that today. That is my topic on the censorship that I was going to say. Her version of misinformation. Yeah, so this is the COVID stuff. Yeah, this is a clear violation of the First Amendment. This is very, very dangerous territory. This is really, really, really bad. I'm not saying a lot about it right now because I wanted it to be a whole topic, and it will be on a future show. It was supposed to be one of the topics today, but I've run out of time. So I'll get to it in a future show, I promise. Tom says, Yohan, you should get Action Jackson to do a video on a comment Rob Lawson said that he claimed you say it is okay to feel an employee up on the job. I said that? That it's okay to feel an employee up on the job? I said that? That would be bizarre, right? I'm against violence. Feeling an employee up on the job is violence. I mean, if it's consensual, but I guess I don't know what he's, yeah. Okay, Action Jackson, figure this out and let me know. I said it was okay to feel an employee up on a job. With no consent? How would I ever say that? How do you stay such a gentleman in and after debates, because that Rob Lawson guy acted so cordial after talking with you and is now is strawmanning? I haven't seen Rob Lawson say that, and I don't know. I don't know what he's basing that on. I don't know. Anyway, well, you know what? Why would I get angry? Why would I get upset? Why would I let these idiots affect the quality of my life for one iota? You know, I really do take seriously this idea that Howard Roark said, I don't think of you. And it's not that I don't think of them, because I think of them to the extent that I have to debate them and attack them. But I don't think of them in the sense of nothing they say hurts me. Nothing they say sticks. Nothing they say upsets me, because my life's too valuable to waste on these idiots. If the colleges were reset today to objective standards, what subjects would be taught? What subjects would be taught? I don't know what you mean. What subjects would be taught, probably. I mean, a lot of subjects, a lot of subjects. Certainly engineering, science, math, physics, history, literature, English. Maybe that's literature, I'm not sure. Business. Most of the subjects, I mean, the subjects, the illegitimate fields as a field would be things like critical race theory or gender studies or race studies or, things like that. Transgender studies. There might be a class on transgender because it's an interesting phenomena. Somebody should study it. But it's not a whole program. It's a class. It's a research project, whatever. All of these things are research projects. Is sociology an actual subject? It might be. You'd have to think about what are you studying? I mean, I'd have to think about it. What do you study in sociology? What is it? I don't think you wouldn't have a department called thinking or logic or aesthetics. Those would be classes within the philosophy department. Now, it could be that every student would have a class on thinking, on thinking skills, on logic, which would include logic. Maybe some universities would have a class on aesthetics that everybody would have to take. Not today, but in an ideal society. But most of the classes that are being taught today, most of the subjects, broadly speaking, being taught today would be taught. They'd just be taught differently and better. Art history would definitely be a topic. Tom says it's in the Rob Lawson and Ben Burgess in the video of them discussing the stem-cell debate. But in what context did he say, I'm okay with an employer feeling up an employee? I mean, did he say this in some context of a particular? It wasn't in the Sam Seder debate because that didn't come up. Is it something I said during something else? Okay, Arthur, this will be the last question, I think. Last coin from Piggy Bank tonight. Well, it's a big coin, so thank you. It's $50. I appreciate that. What do you think the future of gender relations will be like in the future? Will the gender divide increase to the point of males and females actively avoiding each other? Or will it eventually cease? In what world? I think it'll cease. I think it's going to go away. I think it's artificial. I think it's silly, and I think that nature will take its course in the sense that there is obviously a real attraction between females and males, and there is a real reason for that attraction. It's rooted in biology, but it's also, I think, it's rooted in our nature of the female and the nature of the male, that they need each other. And exactly what all that means, I'm going to leave that to a psychologist to figure out. But I'm pretty convinced it exists, and it's needed. And being with somebody of the opposite sex, and unless you're a homosexual, but being with somebody of the opposite sex I think is necessary for achieving, happiness, and being successful at that is necessary. I think we're going through a very difficult period in which, even if we were rational, that is, even if we lived in a rational culture, we would probably be going through a difficult period in which roles are shifting because the nature of labor, the nature of work has changed, so that we've shifted from work being primarily physical to work being primarily mental. Women are no longer disadvantaged when it comes to work. Therefore, women can take care of themselves. They can work. They can attain everything that we as men have always attained psychologically from work. They can now attain it. They're much more independent. They're much more independent financially. They don't need a man to support them. That has caused a real shift and a real realignment in the relationship between men and women. It's a realignment that would have, I think, fixed itself pretty easily in a rational society, but we're not in a rational society. So too many women have bought into kind of a feminist viewpoint where males are somehow inferior and males are bad and males are wrong and males are no good. And now men are rebelling against that and joining, I don't know, incels or go your own way or whatever it's called, which rejects women, and we don't need women, and we don't need them, and they're no good and they're bad, and they're doing the same thing the feminists did in reverse, which is the stupidest strategy in the world. So men and women are not equal in a sense of outcome, but they're equal in a sense of rights. But they're not equal in a sense of outcome. But no two people are equal in a sense of outcome of any gender. And men and women are complements in some sense, psychologically and sexually, right? Obviously, sexually they're complements, penetrator, but also there's a psychological manifestation of that in which they complement each other psychologically and emotionally. So I do think that union is important and fundamental to happiness and to human beings. And I think that to the extent that we're rational, we'll get back to it. It's part of the irrationality of the culture right now that we're seeing this divide. That instead of seeing the relationship as win-win, we're seeing the relationship as zero-sum, just like we see other relationships. It's also a sign of lack of self-esteem. Men who can't handle women who are strong, women who can support themselves, men who can't imagine a woman earning more than them. That's an issue of this men's self-esteem. They've got a problem. But women's self-esteem, where they have to put down the male in order to gain self-esteem, and that's their self-esteem. We live in an era of low self-esteem. We live in an era where people lack self-esteem, partially because of the self-esteem movement, and partially because altruism has taught people not to be proud, not to take credit for their own achievements, not to attain self-esteem. So this irrationality, right, is sad, and will go away ultimately. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. I will see you all. I'm not sure. Well, tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. Probably around the same time, middle of the day Pacific time, so evening East Coast time. Thanks. I mean, you guys were very generous today. We made $740. That's fantastic. Thank you. Expect the same tomorrow, Alejandrina. Hopefully you'll be here tomorrow, and I'll post soon what time it's going to be, and we'll see what we do tomorrow. What show we'll do tomorrow. I'm not sure what the topic will be, but I might pick up on the censorship point that Scott made about the Biden administration's working with Facebook, which is, and that relates to the Trump lawsuit against social media. So I'll pick up on that thread. All right, thanks, guys, and don't forget to like the show before you leave. And those of you who want to support the show, don't forget you can do it on a regular basis, monthly, at youronbookshow.com/support, Patreon, and Subscribestar. Have a great rest.